I'm a gang member. Our boss, Seb, forcefully took a stunning beauty, Victoria, but she refused him, and he was furious. He pointed at me and threatened her. If you reject me again, I'll let this guy. You know. Victoria defiantly replied, Go ahead then. I was completely dumbfounded. What's wrong with me? Does anyone care about my feelings? Don't underlings deserve respect? I despairingly lit a cigarette, my face pale and grim. A colleague patted my shoulder sympathetically, saying, Go in now. If you're late, the boss will take it out on you too. I despaired and walked into the dimly lit room. Victoria, the woman Seb had taken, was kneeling on the ground, her hands cuffed behind her back, but her head held high. She was beautiful, a smear of blood on her lip, a mark from biting the boss's ear. Her eyes were narrowed, a cold, defiant glare that could tear me apart. I locked the door with a bang, shutting out the noise. With a last sliver of hope, I looked at her again. She was slender, with delicate shoulders and a tiny waist, and her features were stunning, but her beauty was marred by a sickly coldness in her eyes. I felt weakened just by looking at her. My fingers itched, and I pulled out another cigarette, putting it between my lips before approaching her. Without expression, she looked up and said, You waste of space, just get it over with. I slapped her, not hard, but firmly. Watch your mouth, I said, taking a drag of my cigarette. I sighed wearily. Can you make a sound? She questioned, What? I said, Forget it. I closed my eyes, recalling some videos and imitated the sounds I'd heard. This was my first time, and it was in front of a stranger. I was incredibly awkward. The woman suddenly fell silent. Only the muffled sounds, strange and erotic even to my own ears, mingled with the smoke. It was the absolute worst 3 minutes of my thug life. I couldn't stand it anymore. I'd rather carry the stigma of being a 1-minute man than continue. A hesitant moan joined in, the voice richer, more textured, almost like a professional voice actress, soft, seductive, and alluring. My own grunts faltered and then intensified, our sounds becoming one. Afterward, the atmosphere was thick with awkwardness. She lowered her eyes and said in a barely audible whisper, Give me a cigarette. I hesitated, but offered her one. She stared at me, then gently bit the cigarette, her tongue touching the filter. She raised her head, carefully touching the tip of her cigarette to mine to light it. The flame reflected in her dark eyes a spark of orange. She softly said, Thank you. Her movements were too quick. I didn't react fast enough, and I unconsciously frowned. She saw it, but I didn't apologize. A young girl, where did she learn to smoke? And why is she so worldly? I muttered. It's fine, don't tell anyone. Before leaving, I turned back and kicked her in the butt twice. Later, my colleague praised me. Dude, good job. That girl was limping when she walked away. I basked in the praise. Victoria seemed less defiant, even talking more to Seb. He was pleased and decided to let her out to buy some clothes, with someone watching her, of course. I had other things to worry about, leading my guys to take over a territory in Silver Bay. Halfway there, I got a call. My colleague told me to hurry back, urgent business. I didn't change, just kept my gun, hopped in my car, and rushed to the mall, still in my black suit, half my face covered in blood. Victoria was still stunning, but now in an off-the-shoulder white dress with ruffled sleeves. She stood tall and elegant, clean and refreshed like polished jade. My colleague pushed me forward. She pissed off the boss again. You go. Why me? I asked. Out of all of us, you're the only one with bleached hair, the only one who looks like a real thug. Who else is going to do it? The boss, Ethan, shouted. Victoria, I'll ask you one last time, will you wear it? It was a black sheer top, almost transparent, full of holes. Victoria sneered. Ethan, all you know is humiliating people. I won't wear it, not even if I die. Before she could finish, she lunged at me, knocking me down, straddling me and grabbing my gun, aiming it at her head. I was terrified. What the hell is wrong with you? What does this have to do with me? I quickly hugged her, whispering, Don't be stubborn. Just give in. I'll take off my jacket and cover you up, okay? Victoria didn't say anything. I was afraid Seb would make me, you know. I used all my strength to calm her down, babying her as if she were my own mother. Finally, she coldly picked up the clothes. When she went out, Seb glanced at my suit covering Victoria and didn't say anything. After working for him for so long, I understood that Ethan sometimes just cared about appearances. It was just about saving face. Victoria was young and didn't understand. But truthfully, I admired her. Her spirit was fierce. She would never submit. I felt a pang of sympathy. Such a woman must have suffered a great deal. That night, Victoria was sent to my room again. She's yours for the night, my younger brother said. The boss said last time worked well, but it didn't last. He wants you to really disgust Victoria, make her understand the boss's statuedness. I sighed. Victoria sat on the edge of my bed, still wrapped in my suit jacket. I rubbed my temples. Remember to return my jacket, I said. Victoria stared at me intensely, slowly removing the jacket. She was wearing nothing underneath. I turned away. I'll find you some pajamas. Go to sleep. She hesitated, her expression still grim. It's fine, she said, biting her lip. Let's just do it. There was arrogance in her face, a belief that her beauty would captivate anyone, drive them mad. Whether it was Ethan's forceful conquest or a few nights with me, it didn't matter to her. But did it matter to me? Was I just a plot device in some short story, a tool to be used however the protagonist needed? I shrugged indifferently. No, I said. She clutched the sheets, her face flushed. We have to really do this at least once. I was irritated. I can't get hard with you. Victoria was stunned. What? She asked, bewildered. I tried to explain, but my backup phone buzzed. I turned away quickly. Whose phone is that? She asked. I thought for a second and lied. My girlfriend? In a fleeting glance, I saw Victoria's expression freeze, her brow furrowing slightly, but I immediately dismissed it. I went to the balcony, closed the door to ensure privacy, and answered. Sir, the fish have arrived. When's the next shipment? This meant Seb had succeeded, and the question was when Ethan's next shipment would arrive. I quickly translated the code and replied in kind. By the time I hung up, Victoria was asleep. She must have been used to being pampered before her kidnapping, as she sprawled across the middle of the bed. If I slept there, I'd be right next to her. I turned off the light, not intending to get close. I lay on the edge of the bed, half my body on the floor, and drifted off. In a hazy state, I felt someone get out of bed, take off my shoes, and carefully lift my legs onto the bed. She finally spoke, unable to contain herself. I heard that. A man's voice. Is that your boyfriend? That's why you're not attracted to me? Because you reject women? Victoria pressed herself against me, her cheekbones flushed with anger, her fingers trembling, fragile like a delicate porcelain doll. You're a thug, she hissed. And you have no right to reject me. No one has ever rejected me. Her eyes locked on mine, our foreheads touching, our pupils meeting. I was speechless, about to yell, then froze. In the darkness, I felt her rapid breathing and racing heartbeat, her body trembling like a leaf in the wind. She was experiencing a flashback. I'd seen similar reactions in other victims before. While I didn't understand the cause of her reaction, I instinctively patted her shoulder. I'm not rejecting you, I said. Panicked, I stuck to my previous lie. I just don't want to betray my boyfriend, I mumbled. Victoria's breath hitched. Her face froze. She probably assumed I was bisexual, and a flicker of pleasure crossed her eyes. By the way, I said, don't tell anyone about my boyfriend. Once a lie is started, it's easy to continue. You know how it is in our line of work, I said. We need to maintain a certain image. If they knew about my preferences, my guys wouldn't respect me. So I haven't told anyone about him. In a few years, when I've saved enough money, I'll quit and settle down with him. Victoria was silent for a moment, a subtle jealousy simmering beneath the surface, a feeling she couldn't voice. She stared at me, whispering, "You're a good man." I nodded, uncomfortable with the closeness. I pushed her gently and stood up. She didn't resist, collapsing onto the bed like a lifeless body, staring at me with wide eyes. Moonlight illuminated her beautiful eyes, red-rimmed and filled with an unknown emotion, a mixture of sadness, defiance, and shameful helplessness. Her beauty was the kind you only see on screen, tragic, strong-willed, and tinged with desperate vulnerability. I turned away, unable to sleep, and went outside. Downstairs, a colleague was on guard duty. He glanced at me and I slumped down, lighting a cigarette. He'd never approved of this. He sighed and tried to comfort me. "Buster, it's unavoidable. Don't beat yourself up. This is just how it is for us. Ethan's actually pretty decent. That Louis, the old boss, he didn't treat people like people. He'd grab a woman and force his underlings to disgust her. The whole time he'd watch, and so would the others. That woman had it really rough." I took a deep drag of my cigarette. "Louis got executed last month." "I know," he said. "Between you and me, I think the cops were right to do it. But anyway, we're all victims of our lack of education, stuck in this life just trying to make a living. It was unavoidable, so I changed the subject. How did she end up here?" Victoria had been there for almost a year, but I'd never inquired about her. As an undercover agent, you have to turn a blind eye to certain things, otherwise your conscience wouldn't let you sleep. But inexplicably, I recalled those bloodshot eyes and spoke up. A colleague scratched his head. "How? Could you not know? That girl, she caused quite a commotion." He nodded, recounting her story. Victoria was a top student, a school beauty, accepted into Hong Kong University's medical program. If she'd finished, she would have been a stunning success. But in her first year, she went to Eth's karaoke bar for a reunion, and Eth took a liking to her. He didn't care about gentleness, he simply drugged her. But she was even tougher. She smashed a glass and slashed her wrists, resisting the effects of the drug. I frowned and interrupted. "Didn't her family do anything?" "Her mother died young," the colleague replied. "Her father's a gambler, and her grandmother's insane, claiming Victoria's possessed and needs prayers. Eth paid them off, and her father, hilariously, even helped Eth cover things up when he realized he could get money." I lit another cigarette. The colleague sighed. For almost a year, every time Eth touched her, she would cut her veins, try to jump off buildings, bang her head against walls, even slash her face. If she didn't have a knife, she'd grab Eth's. If he didn't have a knife, she'd attack him. It got so bad. He paused. Eth didn't want to give up, but her face, it was too perfect. No one wanted her to actually scar it. So they had to resort to other methods. His tone was numb and cold. After being used and abused, she became numb, like her spine was removed, a limp fish, simply begging to be serviced. I fought to control my expression, a chill running down my spine. The colleague realized the somber mood and half-jokingly said, "You're lucky, kid. You did Eth a favor. You'll become one of his trusted men. No more running around doing dirty work." My heart skipped a beat. That made sense. "Then I won't know when Ethan's next shipment arrives," I muttered. "No, I need to find a way to get myself demoted." When I returned home that morning, Victoria sat on my bed, looking cold and resentful. She stared at me impassively. "You got your suit back. I have nothing to wear." I hummed in response. Perhaps because of what I'd heard about her background, I felt more patience and compassion. I found a shirt. It was too big, hiding her arms. "I'll find a smaller one," I said, frowning. Victoria surprised me. "Your husband's." I was speechless. "How? Is he my husband? What are you saying?" Somehow her expression softened slightly. When I took Victoria to Ethan, I advised, "Don't antagonize him. Be softer. Say some nice things, and you'll suffer less." I hesitated. As a realist, I could do anything to survive. Besides life and death, nothing mattered. But Victoria said calmly, "Impossible." I suddenly had a question. Me and Eth were not so different. Why are you willing to be with me? She shook her head. There's a difference. Her eyes glanced at me. You're honest. I was speechless. It sounded like an insult. Ethan, waiting impatiently, sipped his tea. Satisfied? Victoria stared at him coldly. I quickly tugged at her sleeve. She pursed her lips and nodded, but Ethan saw our little exchange. Buster, he said, let's talk. As I approached, Ethan slapped me, not too hard, not too soft. How was she? He asked. I quickly knelt, showing my weakness. Eth, I swear I have no ulterior motives. I'll do anything you ask. Ethan lectured me before finally saying, Victoria, come and kiss me. Victoria clenched her clothes, remaining motionless. I quickly glanced at her, silently begging her not to interfere. But when she picked up a blade to cut her wrists, I couldn't help it. I snatched it away. I put on a fawning smile. Eth, she still has a temper. Let me try to help her soften up. Ethan's already unhappy expression darkened. He laughed hysterically, grabbing an ornament and throwing it at my head. You're addicted to this, huh? Dare to steal my woman? I knelt, blood streaming down my face, shielding Victoria. No, I just want to help her for a few days. Another throw. Eth, believe me, I truly want to help her become more docile. Ethan roared. You think I'm an idiot? My eyelids were filled with blood, blurring my vision. I sighed inwardly. I was the idiot. Those fading scars on Victoria's wrists. I just couldn't help but want to protect her for a few days. I tried my best to defend myself. Eth, for all the times I've risked my life for you, I have no ulterior motive. Believe me. My friend, unable to bear it anymore, spoke up. Eth, didn't Rooster bring you 2 girls yesterday? You're busy trying them out anyway. Why not? Buster, my other guys, and I agreed to give it a shot. Ethan frowned, then plastered on a smile. He helped me up, saying, Who did that awful dye job? Come on, the floor's cold. I was just testing you, worried a woman had clouded your judgment. Fine, keep her a few more days. I stood, trembling, and thanked him. He waved a hand. That Silver Bay property, why didn't you secure it? Heard you ran. We reward and punish equally. Buster, you've been with me years, but you messed up, so you're doing the dirty work. Understand? I nodded, offering no defense. My plan had worked, provoking him, getting demoted, and saving Victoria. I was a genius. Outside, Victoria clung to me, refusing to let go. I gave up. Dizzy and weak, she helped me to my room. My blood stained her clothes. We were both a mess. My colleagues, fearing Victoria would kill me, the man who had violated her, secretly watched us. Later, a colleague told me he'd heard Victoria crying. That girl never cried, he said. Not even when her dad sold her. It's weird. I shrugged. He patted my shoulder. You're finished, he said. What do you mean? I asked. She cried. So what? Girls cry. Guys cry. Strangers cry. What's the big deal? He stared, then slowly explained. Eth wants your blonde hair dyed black. Are you kidding me? I said. It wasn't about liking blonde hair, just about looking like a thug. With black hair and eyebrows, I looked in the mirror, feeling strange. The dark hair brought out a seriousness I hadn't seen before. I looked sharper, more handsome. You look quite handsome, a cool voice said from behind me. Victoria was leaning against the door, watching me. I looked away. I'm undercover. I'm not getting involved with hostages, I muttered. The dirty work involved transporting goods. I drove several small shipments, careful not to attract attention, waiting for Ethan to relax so we could catch the big fish. Victoria sometimes accompanied me, sometimes rested in the room. I got her a TV and a streaming subscription to keep her occupied. Away from Ethan, she seemed to treat my apartment as a sanctuary. Her previously guarded and fragile demeanor softened, and she gained 5 or 6 pounds. Compared to when I first met her, she was healthier, though her habits were less than healthy. She'd often use my clothes as blankets while I was out. When I confronted her, she'd give me that sleepy, innocent look and say, I was cold. This coastal city was just entering winter. It wasn't that cold. I grumbled and bought her 2 more blankets. As I refolded my clothes, Victoria lay in bed, chatting casually. She looked at me with curious eyes. "Why do you dress so old-fashioned?" she asked like a gossip columnist. "Does your boyfriend like it? Don't you guys wear matching outfits?" I didn't answer. "Buster," she continued, "what's your real name?" I hesitated, then softly said, "Sebastian." She repeated it, over and over, then somehow it turned into Seb. "Seb," she asked, "do you think I'm twisted?" She looked at me seriously, her eyes lacking the innocence of her age. I just said, "Don't think about that. It's understandable after everything you've been through. You have a boyfriend," she said, "and I'm still here. Won't he mind?" I was speechless. She couldn't just let this go, and besides, I had no experience in this area. I'd never dated anyone. Even if I had a boyfriend in the future, protecting a child from coercion as a police officer would be perfectly acceptable, wouldn't it? I saw her neediness as misplaced gratitude, a mistaken sense of affection. Once rescued, seeing the world would set her straight. "No," I said, shaking my head. "We didn't do anything. We have a clear conscience." She stared at me for a long time, then whispered, "I need to tell you something. He never touched me. I'm clean. Don't reject me." "What does that have to do with anything?" I said. She interrupted, "Seb, please don't resent me. I've had such bad luck since I was a child. That's why I'm so extreme. Please understand." I didn't understand why she'd suddenly brought this up. I nodded vaguely. Later I realized her words were carefully crafted, a self-serving disclaimer. The net was closing in, and I was swamped. The contact had set up a safe house for planning. Phones were a luxury I could no longer afford. Victoria casually asked me why I hadn't been calling my boyfriend lately. I was speechless. I hadn't come up with an excuse yet. She pressed, "Did you break up?" I replied, "No." She pouted, and started flipping through a fashion magazine, the rustling growing louder and louder. It was completely random. I ignored her. My phone vibrated. The coded message translated to, "Crystal Lake Inn, room 302, business." As usual. I greeted my associates and hurried out. The others assumed I was off to see a prostitute again. They winked and nudged each other. My reputation was getting increasingly tarnished. At the inn, Charlie and Louis were huddled over a laptop. We discussed the delivery details. Charlie said, "Seb, this is a huge sum. It'll definitely nail Ethan." Everything was almost over. I nodded. Suddenly a knock. The 3 of us froze, exchanging silent glances. Louis dove into a closet. Charlie had nowhere to hide and crouched behind the curtains. I peered through the peephole, frowned, and opened the door. "Victoria?" Victoria's cheeks were flushed with urgency and nervousness, as if she'd discovered some secret. She stormed in, coldly saying to the curtains, "Don't hide." I stopped her. "What are you doing here?" She bit her lip. "You haven't been seeing any prostitutes these days. You've been secretly meeting your boyfriend, haven't you?" I was speechless. I paused. Charlie, bewildered, emerged from behind the curtains. I gave him a look. Gritting his teeth, he took my hand. Victoria's eyes flared, her gaze sweeping over Charlie. He was unremarkable, an ideal undercover operative. Victoria's eyes flickered, a complex mix of jealousy and incomprehension clouding them. I said, "Victoria, since you know, give us some space." She cut me off. "Let me finish. I saw another man go in with him. He's hiding here. Your boyfriend is cheating on you." Victoria was indignant. Her beautiful eyes darted towards the closet. "Your boyfriend has someone else. He doesn't truly love you." Holy crap, this was a huge misunderstanding. She moved to yank open the closet door. My scalp tingled. I didn't want things to escalate. With a bang, I slammed the closet door shut, forcing a cold expression. "Victoria, enough." Victoria froze, realizing I was stopping her. Her chest heaved, her body trembling slightly. Eyes red-rimmed, she said, "Seb, there's really someone in there, believe me." Charlie, quick on his feet, patted my shoulder, adopting a ridiculously effeminate tone. "Honey, say something. Look at her. Why is she like this?" I was speechless. Not all gay men had to talk like that. The situation was spiraling out of control. I wanted a swift resolution. I snapped, "Victoria, go home." She shook her head. "No way." She couldn't believe it. "At this point, you're still protecting him? What's so good about him? Why can't you?" She bit her lip, fighting back tears, and then, in a familiar tone, she said, "Brother, please, believe me. Open the closet door." I replied, "Victoria, this is my business." I said, "Go home. You're different. You've been gone too long. They'll come looking for you." Tears welled in her eyes, her face a picture of misery, as if trapped in a nightmare, teetering on the brink of collapse. After a long silence, her clever mind finally grasped it, or perhaps finally dared to admit her suspicions. "You know someone's in there and you're still protecting him." I was speechless. Great, now I was a cuckolded gay man. My reputation was even dirtier. Charlie patted my shoulder comfortingly. This seemed to further inflame Victoria. Her eyes narrowed on Charlie, jealousy threatening to consume her, but with no legitimate outlet for her rage. She glared at him, a mixture of fear and bitterness, tears finally streaming down her face. She whispered, "Why? Why? Why can he, a worthless man, get love?" She trembled, her voice broken with sorrow. "I haven't done anything wrong. Why is God doing this to me?" I clenched my fist, Victoria, but before I could finish, she hung her head, avoiding my gaze, and left. She never came back. My associate said she went back to Ethan. I smoked a cigarette, inexplicably agitated. My associates congratulated me. We can finally do what small-time thugs should do. Somehow, I didn't feel happy or relieved. Perhaps it was simply because the protection I'd earned through blood and sweat was easily discarded. Even selfless acts of kindness could leave one feeling cold, but perhaps there were other, more complex emotions I couldn't articulate. Ethan was cautious about the deal, delaying arrangements. I waited at the docks for instructions, growing restless. My associates said Victoria had become Ethan's goddaughter. They looked at my face quizzically. "What's wrong? It's good news. He's adopted a goddaughter. She'd have a better life and you wouldn't have to carry this burden. It's for the best." I took a deep drag from my cigarette, the ember flickering. Suddenly I remembered her eyes when we first met, clear, cool, yet refusing to surrender. It was like countless tiny insects gnawing at my heart, a bitter, agonizing pain. "Damn it," I muttered under my breath. The Christmas party, my colleagues and I went to Ethan's villa. It was an annual gathering. I saw Victoria again, leaning against Ethan. Her expression was cold. Our eyes met briefly, and she quickly looked away. Ethan saw me, smiled, and said, "Buster, you've done a great job these past few times. Hard work, my friend." Vicky raised her glass. "Buster, be good to my brother." Victoria handed me the drink, our fingers brushing. I silently finished the wine and said, "Thanks to Eth's kind words, I'm undeserving of such praise." Ethan, smiling, caressed Victoria's hand. I quickly looked away, but the image replayed in my mind, their intertwined hands. Her hand looked so soft. My colleagues were partying wildly, living for the moment. I guess I just drank to fit in, and I got pretty drunk. As I was leaving, Victoria stopped me. "Eth wants to see you," she said. She led me to a dark, deserted hallway. Suddenly, she grabbed my tie, stood on her tiptoes, and kissed me. My heart pounded, my blood seemed to rush to one spot. I pushed her away. "Stop it," I said. But she held onto my sleeve, preventing me from leaving. She whispered, "You have a girlfriend, and I want to be your mistress. I'm disgusting, I'm depraved. I know all of this. You don't need to tell me." She laughed, a painful laugh, tears in her eyes. "Don't mention your girlfriend again." I'm immoral, ungrateful, I don't deserve to live. Kill me. Let your peanut-sized boyfriend kill me. If you don't, I'll keep chasing you." I was speechless. Who mentioned her boyfriend? She kept bringing it up. And peanut-sized. I quickly changed the subject. "What are you doing? This is Ethan's house. Aren't you afraid he'll see us?" The image of their clasped hands flashed through my mind again. Victoria wiped away her tears. "It's fine, I don't care," she said. "I haven't slept with him. He made me his adopted daughter. He just found a greater use for me." She tapped her head. "Ethan's old. He needs someone he can trust to handle things, but he doesn't trust his other men. He's afraid of a power struggle, but I'm different. Without him, this so-called little lover is nothing. So he chose me as his adopted daughter, using his name to handle things. Don't overthink it." She paused. "Sebastian, believe me, okay?" I said softly, "I didn't say I didn't believe you. I wasn't overthinking it. You're just being too cautious." She chuckled. I finally asked, "If you're unhappy, can I try again, Tato?" She lowered her eyes. "No, Seb, but listen to me. Don't go to the next delivery." She squeezed my arm, serious as could be. "Don't go." Naturally, I went anyway. I couldn't be absent from the crucial final stage. The drop-off point changed several times, ending up at a small harbor. I drove the truck slowly and cautiously through the night. My colleague hadn't sensed anything was wrong. He was smoking and messing with the car stereo. His phone buzzed. He looked at the screen and his face changed. I also had a bad feeling, about to stop the truck, when I heard a dangerous hissing sound. Damn it! The next second, a deafening explosion rocked us. A wall of fire almost overturned the truck. I grabbed my gun, grabbed my phone, and jumped out. Sirens wailed in the distance. On the phone, Lewis yelled, "It's not what we planned. There's another mole on Ethan's side." I clenched my jaw, looking for a place to hide, a guess already forming in my mind. The sirens grew louder. "It's okay," Louis said. "I've alerted them about your identity. You're safe." I breathed a sigh of relief. Then someone pressed a gun to my back. I couldn't fight back as they dragged me into an alley. A familiar voice spoke. "Ethan's dead," she said. As soon as she spoke, I relaxed. I turned around. "Victoria?" I asked. She nodded. "Ethan's dead. The others who should be arrested are arrested. The ones who should die are dead." I frowned. "What happened? Are you all right?" The clouds parted, the moonlight brightened. I saw Victoria's expression clearly. Her face held a stiff smile, a smile filled with shattered obsession, torn apart by endless guilt and unfillable longing. It was both pitiful and chilling. "The police will be here soon," she said. "You'll be arrested." She spoke softly, quickly. Victoria stood in front of me, her eyes dark. She bit her lip, threatening me. "I have evidence against you, Sebastian. Just agree to break up with your girlfriend and be with me, and I'll hide you." I was furious. "Victoria, are you crazy? This sort of thing can be a deal? Guilt is guilt. Justice will prevail. When did this young woman become like this? She's gone mad, trying to cover up someone else's crimes. If I were a criminal, would she become my accomplice?" Victoria maintained a manic smile. "Yes, I'm crazy. I'm an ungrateful viper. But Sebastian, I have no other choice. You're the only one who's ever been good to me." She trembled. "I love you. I only want you. You must despise a crazy woman's love. You look down on me. You disdain me. I really have no other way." Her smile faded. Her cold, elegant face, bathed in firelight, held a desperate resolve. "Sebastian, promise me, or I'll send you to prison." I remained impassive, unyielding. Victoria softened, pleading, pathetically appearing as if she were the one with the leverage. "Please, brother, promise me. Please, all right?" Suddenly a voice called out, "Hey, what are you doing?" The shout startled Victoria. She instinctively tried to push me away. "He's not. but before she could finish, several officers saw me. I sighed. This is Victoria, the kidnapping victim. She trusts me. The moment those words left my lips, I felt the girl beside me stop breathing. She understood everything. Her last hope vanished in a ridiculous way, exposing her ugly machinations. She had no more leverage. Victoria froze, then slowly curled up on the ground, as if trying to bury herself in the dirt. The officers exchanged hurried greetings, quietly finishing their job. My task was done. There was no reason to stay. But I hesitated for 2 seconds. 2 seconds for Victoria. I left silently. From the alley came a cry of pain, growing louder, hysterical, full of regret. 3 years later, my record store was thriving. I'd landed some big, long-term orders. Charlie and Louie had seen me a few times, and we all agreed on one thing. I couldn't be an undercover cop. My conscience was too heavy. I couldn't bear to be cruel. Getting through that situation with Ethan was pure luck. Plus, Ethan was a paper tiger. His methods weren't that ruthless. That's how I narrowly escaped. Afterwards, to avoid being recognized by any remaining gang members, I went underground, leaving the force. Charlie consoled me. Look on the bright side. You don't have to pretend to be gay anymore. Every time I thought about it, about that hotel showdown, I couldn't help but laugh. But all memories ended with Victoria's departing figure that day. I often dreamed of Victoria, but I never proactively sought her out. I figured her desperate, grasping love would fade as life returned to normal. 3 years. She should have forgotten who I was. Charlie found me again, hesitant. Seb, something might trouble you, but you're the best person for this. What is it? I asked. Remember Victoria? When we closed the net, we stumbled upon gang infighting. A big mess. A lot of people died. It wasn't an accident, I said. I figured out it was Victoria who fanned the flames. Victoria went abroad afterward and returned last week. We suspect she knows where some of the escaped criminals are, Charlie said. Just questioning? Seems I'm not needed for something so simple, I said. Charlie shook his head. It's not that easy, Seb. You wouldn't believe how she is now. She's a famous novelist, a hotshot in the literary world. We can't just drag her to the station. It wouldn't look good. I nodded. Charlie handed me a gala invitation, suggesting I talk to her. Reuniting with an old friend always brings a strange mix of emotions. Dressed in a suit, standing in the corner of the ballroom, sipping wine, I felt strangely detached. Suddenly, all conversation ceased. Eyes, like a sea, converged on one point. Someone hurried in, immediately surrounded by fawning guests. I stood by the wall, silently observing. It was Victoria, but not quite. She'd been hardened by hardship, but still had a touch of youthful rebellion. The woman before me was refined and elegant, wearing a permanent mask. Her eyes were soft. It was hard to imagine such a wealthy woman having such a past, such pain. I hesitated, unsure whether to bring up her painful memories, but Victoria approached me. She smiled, extending her hand. Long time no see, as if nothing had happened. I was stunned, taking her hand. Victoria didn't let go. Swaying slightly, she smiled. So you're Sebastian. All the guests have name tags, her eyes clear. You always lied to me, Seb. I pulled my hand away, but Victoria held on tight, whispering stubbornly, boyfriend was fake. Everything was fake. I scolded her softly. Victoria, I don't understand why you know so much about me. Were you investigating me? What's so interesting about an ordinary guy like me? Her lips were pressed together, her back radiating the adoration and curiosity of those around her. But looking at me, her eyes welled up. She asked, Seb, what's the truth? What's really true between us? I lowered my head, my thoughts in turmoil. I said slowly, I genuinely cared for you back then. Victoria didn't respond. The hurt in her expression vanished, replaced by a slight pout and reddened eyes as she looked at me softly. Don't leave, she whispered. Wait for me to find you. Turning around, she resumed her usual gentle and composed demeanor. Someone escorted me through a side door of the hotel ballroom and up the elevator to the top floor, Victoria's suite. While waiting, I smoked one cigarette after another, agonizing over how to start the conversation. I couldn't figure it out when the man returned, quietly saying, "Mr. Seb, Miss Victoria has already given what you requested to Mr. Charlie. For the past 2 years, Miss Victoria has been tracking down others overseas, and now there are no loose ends." I nodded. He added, "Miss Victoria says you can do as you please." I pondered the meaning of do as you please. Should I wait for her or not? Was she testing to see if, once all our official business was settled, I would still wait for her? If I waited, it meant that what would follow would be purely personal. I understood her intention. That girl. She was still the same as before, leaving no room for herself. I took a deep breath, lowered my head, and softly said, "I'll wait for her." Within minutes, Victoria opened the door. We met each other's gaze in silence. Her chest rose and fell rapidly. She whispered, "Seb," I began, "are you sure about this? Maybe it's just infatuation or gratitude." She was nervous, yet determined. "Seb, I'm sure. I've been thinking about it ever since I left. For many, many years. I've met so many people, seen so much, but one thing hasn't changed. I like you. I really, really like you." I replied, "I'm not a cop anymore. I don't have that halo of justice." She said, "I know." I said, "I'm not a thug either. I can't pull off that tough guy act anymore." She replied, "I know that too, Seb. You never really could." I said, "Also, I need to clarify something. I've never had a partner, male or female." Victoria suddenly smiled. "What do you mean?" She clearly knew the answer. Awkwardly explained, "I mean, I'm not gay. I've never been attracted to men. I've only ever liked you." Victoria looked at me calmly. "I know." She approached, her eyes meeting mine. "Seb, I know, I like you. It has nothing to do with all of that." She gently took my hand, pressing it against her cheek. "I'm just scared you'll reject me. I'm so dark, so obsessive, so extreme. You know that, right?" I replied, "I know." I sighed. "Then it looks like I'll just have to keep a tight rein on you to stop you from doing anything foolish." She looked up, surprised and delighted, seeking confirmation. I nodded. "Victoria, let's try." She gazed at me intently, wrapped her arms around my neck and kissed me, standing on tiptoe. Okay. 3 months into our relationship, she opened an art studio next to a record store. I was surprised. "You can paint?" She chuckled. "Surgeons have steady hands." Even though she could no longer pursue her dream of being a doctor, she looked at me with an innocent, playful expression. "Seb, don't give me that sympathetic look. It's all in the past." I scratched my head and smiled. Charlie's case closed smoothly, and he insisted on celebrating with drinks. After a few rounds, he asked, "Bro, did your girlfriend mind about us?" I was speechless. I gritted my teeth. "Can you stop talking nonsense? What's between us?" He chuckled. "Misunderstandings are cleared up. You're so lucky going undercover and landing a rich woman. It makes me want to go undercover." That was true. I had landed a rich woman. She was willing to transfer all the copyrights and assets to me. She said, "Seb values loyalty the most. Even if you don't like me anymore, you wouldn't break up with me to avoid splitting the assets, leaving me destitute." I was speechless, unsure if she was being serious or not. Charlie joked again. "Speaking of which, your girlfriend must be a powerful woman. Must be a lot of pressure for you, huh?" I just smiled. It was a difficult question to answer. I unconsciously thought of her incredibly gentle and seductive nature in bed, as if she wanted us to be intertwined forever. Thankfully, my years of training had given me a solid physique. I coughed, feeling the alcohol hitting me. Car horns blared outside the restaurant. I turned and recognized Victoria's car. "He found me." I immediately stood up to say goodbye. Charlie chuckled. Seb, you've only been out drinking for a short while, and she's already looking for you. You're definitely henpecked. I rolled my eyes. You talk too much. You're just single for too long and need a wife to keep you in line. Charlie seemed completely drunk. He stood up and chuckled foolishly, wishing you guys happiness, before stumbling out. In the car, Victoria burrowed into my arms. She said in a pitiful voice, Seb, I've already started missing you. I sighed, then kissed her expertly and gently. I said, let's go. Back to work.